Timber Talks is brought to you by Wood Solutions. Stay up to date with the latest in timber, the building material that is strong, safe and sustainable. Here is your host, Adam Jones.
Today we are speaking with Caroline Pidcock all about biophilic design, also known as designing in accordance with nature. Her practice has been inspired by the possibilities of creating desirable places that are sustainable for the planet and enhance people's well-being. After 25 years of running her own residential practice, she's now focusing on how to strategically accelerate the uptake of sustainable ideas. So connection to nature is essential to well-being, yet past design practices in urbanization have led more to a detachment from the natural world. New research funded by Forest and Wood Products Australia, produced by Pollinate and peer-reviewed by Jacki Schirmer of the University of Canberra was launched at the 2018 Green Cities Conference. Now, this has revealed that buildings design and biophilic principles, including natural wooden-looking surfaces in the workplace, are strongly associated with increased employee well-being and satisfaction. This in turn enhances engagement, creativity, innovation, retention and wellness. All of these lead to improvements in productivity and personal and business success. If you want to find out more, I will have links in the show notes that will direct you straight to the report. So in this episode, we discuss the opportunities to reconnect with nature through the built environment, the latest research that supports biophilic design principles, and the 14 patterns of biophilic design as described by Terrapin. And now for the interview, here is Caroline Pidcock.
I suppose my journey started with me being born in a town on northern New South Wales called Grafton. And I was born on the banks of the mighty Clarence River, which was a very powerful influence, I think, in who I am and how I am. When we were 3 years old, we moved to Sydney, and I grew up around Port Jackson and around the bush that surrounded a number of the headlands there. And again, that continued to really strongly influence me. And I think that those strong connections to nature, particularly water, have continued to resonate with me now, because when I find myself in places with really beautiful bushland and really beautiful water, I feel really great. And it's a great place to go and feel, nourished and to find myself getting rejuvenated.
I guess today we're talking a lot about biophilic design. So could you start with the people who are completely unfamiliar with the concept, bringing us all up to the same level about what this design principle is all about?
Sure. So biophilic design, biophilia is bio is life and philia is love. So it's about a love of life. And biophilic design is about connecting, is about the innate relationship between people and nature, and trying to connect people in really meaningful and multi-sensory ways with nature.
So when did you first come across this concept? Was it articulated as biophilic design from when you were growing up in nature, when that was an influence with you now, or is it somewhere along the way has it been the concept being brought to architects?
Look, it wasn't a term that I was familiar with. It was a concept that I was in, that my life has been embedded in, but it wasn't a term that I knew until I started to really work with the Living Building Challenge, which refers to biophilic design. So there are some people in the United States, Stephen Kellett and Wilson, who really worked a lot around this earlier, but I hadn't been aware of their work. But I had obviously been very aware of the ideas of their work, but I had not heard that term. It is a lovely term.
Yeah, it sounds like somewhere along the way there was a disconnection, because in some of the recent research it says that most people spend less than an hour outdoors each day. A third of people aren't happy with their work environment, and a quarter take unplanned leave when they are fit but don't feel like going to work.
Yeah, I think I don't know how we have allowed ourselves to create environments where we are so disconnected from nature, and we're designing and building buildings that don't even have openable windows, let alone every room having a window, which is kind of crazy. And I think that our tolerance for, that certain people have been, removed from that for so long, that our tolerance for that more connected thing to nature has reduced, because nature is messy. There are pests, there are mosquitoes. Sometimes it's too hot, sometimes it's too cold, sometimes it's too windy. But that doesn't mean you need to totally disconnect yourself from that. It means you need environments where you can manage those things well, but still stay connected. And I think that a default position is just to shut it all out and remain indoors, and then you become deeply unhappy and depressed.
Yeah, I remember when I saw your seminar speaking on this topic, somewhere along the lines you had the yin and the yang symbol, which is like the kind of idea of having the equal amount of chaos and order. And, in our environment, if we've got no danger, when we evolve to actually be running around, running away from predators, we're completely different to, what the lifestyle we're meant to have, I guess.
Well, it's a bit like someone said, without shade, you don't know what light is. And, without cold, you don't know what warmth. And without, so you've got to have these contrasts to enable you to truly understand what things are. And a bit of dirt never hurt anyone, really.
Awesome. So somewhere a bit earlier you mentioned some of the patterns of biophilic design by Terrapin, and I think there's 14 of them. So I guess if we can move into what some of these are at the conceptual level, and then hopefully if we can touch on what they might mean at a practical level if there's an architect listening.
Sure. So if we want to go through, Terrapin have taken the Kellett and Wilson ideas and sort of made a different grouping of about 14 different patterns under 3 different areas. So the first area is nature in space. And the first one of that is a visual connection with nature, which is a very simple, people just like to see nature. Much prefer to look out a window at a tree or a valley or the sky or something beautiful. And that's something we should be incorporating into our designs wherever we can.
Yeah, sometimes I guess that would be difficult in the cityscape, but every opportunity you can to, I guess, have the view. Is that right?
Well, I think we've got to get over that thing of saying, in the city it's different. In the city it's actually even more important. So I think we need to be really shaping our planning rules to make sure that more and more people can have that access to views to nature. And how do we incorporate nature in a more meaningful way into cities is a really important thing. The next one is a non-visual connection with nature. And that is, we have many other senses other than sight. We hear things, we feel things, we taste things, we touch things. And having opportunities for all of those senses to be stimulated is really important. So sitting in a room with no air change, with really still air, is not nearly as pleasant as a room where you occasionally get a little breeze over your arm and you kind of feel like, oh, that's nice, isn't it? Same as you hear what's happening around. Obviously certain sounds might not be that beneficial, but there are other ones that can be really, just to hear a bird. Like this morning, I woke up in the bush and you could hear the bird song greeting the morning. It was just gorgeous, And again, we shouldn't be saying, I live in the middle of the centre of Sydney and we regularly have bird songs around here, so it is possible.
Yeah, just on that, I've got a new app and it's white noise, and the actual noise I listen to all night is the sounds of nature. And it's amazing how much better sleep I get just from this. Even though it's a trick in my brain, I'm not really in nature, it really has a big effect.
Yeah, and the other one is sort of running water or, seaside water, which can be a really soothing and beautiful thing to listen to. The next one is non-rhythmic sensory stimuli, which is really about saying that we need to have things that are not necessarily non-rhythmic. Means it's irregular and it's ephemeral and it changes, and those sorts of different stimuli as they change is really, again, important just to kind of keep you alert or even just sort of, I suppose, reassured that it's life, it's not dead, you know. Next one is thermal and airflow variability, which is, again, about having it not just the constant temperature and constant air, you know, which is sort of an office situation that's just deadly, but to know that in the morning it might be a little cooler and then it gets warmer in the day and it cools off at night just reminds you that that's a day, that's what happens in a day. And the same with having just airflow, which is really good. The fifth one is presence of water. And water can be present in many ways. It can be a large ocean, it can be a river, it can be a creek, it can be a pond, it can be a pool. And that presence of water is usually movement. There's a really beautiful play of light, and there's something really peaceful and I suppose calming about water. Next one is dynamic and diffuse light, which means that light and shadow, it changes during the day. It helps you understand what time of day it is, possibly even what season of year it is. And that sort of, it's like this tacit understanding of, and your body knows what's happening in a bigger sense of the world. And that is a really reassuring thing to have happen. And then finally in nature and space is connection with natural systems. So that's where you have, you know, an awareness of natural processes, especially in different seasons. You know, like you see the leaves on the tree at the moment are nearly dropping. You know, I mean, some of the trees are going crazy and thinking it's spring because it's so warm and they're rejuvenating. But, you know, that they're just, that you know that we're going into winter and it's going to change, and this, you know, the days are getting shorter and the you know, there's just various things happening which you understand is what the year is moving on. Yep. So then the next grouping is natural analogues. And the first one of that is biomorphic forms and patterns, which is about symbolic references to natural patterns in nature, so that you might have sort of screens designed with beautiful natural patterns. I mean, I live in a terrace house, and the the beautiful ornate steel screens for the balconies are usually from natural patterns, and there's something really beautiful about those. The next one is material connection with nature, you know, which is where I think timber comes into its own. Yep. And it's obviously something that people, you've done studies that show how important that is. Making people feel good in their environment.
Yeah, so have you been, I guess, surprised with this research? So tagging on to what I said earlier with how they found that, you know, there's so many people unhappy with their work in environment. They found that workers in work environments, when exposed to wood, feel more connected to nature and have more positive associations with their workplace. And also those with wood in their work environments, and it doesn't have to be just exposed structural timber, can be exposed surfaces and any timber in their view. They also take less sick leave, and it was pretty surprising. I think on average from 6 down to 2 sick days per year. And also wood is correlated with higher levels of concentration, improved mood and personal productivity. So were you surprised with some of this research?
I suppose it's always great to hear what you suspect backed up with data. Yes. And I mean, I personally, you know, my family, my father's family were timber millers, you know, for over 100 years. So I have a very strong connection to timber, and I love to have it in my spaces and rooms. And I just think it's it's a timeless material that is always beautiful. And therefore, you know, and I suppose it is a really important part of biophilic design is to have that connection to a natural system, even if it isn't a tree in my house. It sort of speaks to the beauty of nature every day, and that has such a strong impact. It's great to see the research backing up that intuitive thinking that I've always had.
Definitely. Where we had the seminar a few weeks ago at Library at the Dock, they have a lot of exposed structural columns that are timber, and every time you walk past, apparently you see kids touching the timber, which I guess you wouldn't really see with any other structural material, walking past and started hugging the, the actual columns and so forth.
I think even say, timber's one thing, and say stone and really beautiful marbles and other things can have a very similar tactile and beautiful response, but it's never quite as warm as timber, so there is sort of a number of levels of satisfaction and joy that comes from timber.
Definitely. So number 9 was material connection with nature.
To nature.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the last one in that group is complexity and order. And so it's a bit yin and yang, that nature is both simultaneously complex and very ordered. And often the patterns of nature, which might look really complex, so you see them again and again repeating. And there's a sense of, I think your brain subconsciously understands that and feels both challenged and reassured. And that's a really good thing. So bringing that into a design element of having complexity and order is a really important way you can translate that into a building design. And then the last one is grouping is about the nature of space. And that's about how you create spaces to do various things. So, for example, the first one is prospect. And a lot of people feel very positive when you've got a view. And that view is not just about a beautiful view. I think it is this sense of prospect, and comes back to that innate thing from our ancestors on the African plains, where you can look out and you can see opportunities and you can see danger, and therefore you can keep an eye on what's happening in the world, which is a good thing. The next one is refuge, which is finding a place of security and safety. And I think that's just, I don't think I need to explain why that's an important thing to do. But in all our daily lives, even in these very big open spaces, everyone's talking about open plan this and open plan that. Sometimes it's really nice to have little places of refuge within that, from where you can have prospect out into that open plan and larger and noisier and busier place, but have your own refuge. And I think offices are building more and more little quiet rooms where you can go to seek that within those bigger spaces.
So it sounds like across a whole building you might have elements of these 14 we're going through right now in different spaces within the building or within the development or even community.
Yeah, and look, some of them are appropriate for, a number of them will be appropriate for a project, and some of them might not be, but I think that's the thing, is to have the shopping list of ideas and then find the ones that are appropriate. The next one is mystery, and I think we all love to, you kind of look down and you go, oh, what's beyond there, whether it's down a corridor or in a garden or up some stairs leading you to somewhere, and you're drawn through the space through that sense of mystery and finding that, which is always a lovely sort of thing to have. And then finally, the last one might seem funny, but it's risk and peril. But, when you walk out onto a balcony that overhangs something and you've got a bit of risk that you're overlooking there, or there's something above you that feels dangerous. And I suppose by having opportunities of that within a built environment makes you realise how safe and secure other places are. Again, back to that yin and yang of sort of having that sort of danger that then enables you to understand and feel safe as well.
Yep. Yeah, awesome. So those 14 are incredible. And as you said, you maybe don't need to get every single one of them all into the one development, but is there any case studies that you know of or you've been a part of in the past that have really got the mix of these things right and really designed with how we evolved?
Well, look, I've got a number of ones that of living building challenge projects that I've seen that I've really, really enjoyed, and they're both super sustainable and also really just delightful. So the first one is the Birchie Science Wing at a school at the Birchie School in Seattle, Washington. And in that building, it's a little science wing that's added onto a school. They've got a number of different elements that really connect these students to nature, so that they are really embedded in them as they study their natural ecosystems. And one of them that is really joyous is in the concrete floor, they've got a little sort of rule, which is like a creek bed that's got stones and glass over it. And whenever it rains, the rainwater kind of comes rushing through there with both, and they can hear it and they can see it, and it plays on the stones as it goes through. And then on either side of it, they've embedded these beautiful fish, metal fish into the concrete. And that's the importance of salmon in the streams for places like Seattle is phenomenal, because the salmon get eaten by bears and the remains thrown into the forests, and that protein is apparently really important for the forest to flourish. So these kids are constantly brought to attention this important part of their ecosystem in a very delightful and enjoyable way. They've also got a green wall in the thing which treats the grey water from their basins and other things, and sort of also cleans the air, which is a lovely, beautiful thing to have. And another building which I've just recently been to is the meeting house for the Tuhoe Nation in New Zealand, and they are a people of the forest. And this building has been designed to totally embed their understanding of their place, of them as people, and their place and their stories within this building. And there's beautiful sort of curved timber, huge timber structure at the entry place, which provides a sort of, talks about the movement of the sun through the sky. It provides a barrier between inside and out so that people know that they've crossed a threshold. There's beautiful artwork in behind, and there's timber all through the building, which was all salvaged timber, because they don't cut down timber themselves, but they all went out into the forest and found timber and brought it in and used it in very careful and great ways, and also worked out how to make it work with their seismic issues which they have in New Zealand. But great beauty and delight in the expression of those materials, and in creating spaces of prospect and refuge and light and movement of the sun and movement of the people. So, which is great. I mean, there are others I could talk about, but I think those two are particularly lovely. Yeah.
It sounds like you could talk about it all day. So out of the 14, which ones do you think are the easiest to incorporate for designers in their projects today?
Well, I just think we've got to get much more serious about designing buildings with windows that open, that allow airflow into a building, that allow views of nature that are not, and that does not mean totally glazed buildings. I think people get really lazy and just do totally glazed buildings, and that is not the answer. But I just think that having that basic connection where on a very regular basis throughout the day you can connect yourself with a natural system is really important. And views often are. But the other thing is even to bring in little courtyards into buildings, because you say, you can't do it so easily in the city. My office building in Redfern was a building that had been built from, the roof covered every boundary, and we just pulled out a couple of courtyards and put plants and other things in them, and they just were fantastic because they brought changing light into the building, they brought plants into the building, they brought airflow and a whole lot of things. So I think that at the very base level is really important. And then I think, say, materials, obviously using timber and using patterns of nature is a really easy and very effective way of connecting people to a biophilic sense.
Awesome. I've learned so much today from speaking to you, but if people listening want to go and find out more about biophilic design, where can they go?
Okay, there's a website called biophilicdesign.net, and that is the sort of original Wilson kind of place, and there's a lot of there's a lot of resources there, including references to different books. There's a website of Terrapin.com, which is Terrapin Bright Green's website, and they have got an unbelievable amount of resources which they are letting people have for free, including about their 14 patterns and a number of different case studies, which is great. And importantly, the International Living Future Institute has a biophilic initiative. So if you Google all of that, you'll come up to their page, and there's a lot of help there and a lot of references to other places to go.
Yeah, fantastic. And we'll put all of these references and links in the show notes. And if people want to find out more about you and your business, where can they find you?
I am in the process of doing a new website, which and that's pidcock.com.au.
The research we spoke about can be found in the show notes. Also, have you got a question about wood? One of the Wood Solutions technical guides should have the answer. To download your free guide, go to the Wood Solutions website, or it can be found in the show notes also.